Hello, friends. We are back. We are back. As always, I like to have a guitar for these things. But I'm not here to play guitar. I'm here to tell you about my second Vipassana retreat. And what a retreat that was. So, I have my little notes here. Pardon my disorganization. But yeah, so as I go about this, if you have any questions, please do ask. It's really important that the technique and the process is clear and everything, and that, if there's any ambiguity, that gets sorted out. The other thing is, I already made another video a while ago about like how these courses go, like what the structure is, that sort of thing. I linked that in the description. If you want to check it out at some point to figure out what the actual structure of the course is in terms of like, you meditate from this hour to this hour, then there's this break and so on and so forth. Essentially, it's a 10-day course, totally silent. You can't talk to people, you can't touch people, you can't look at people. And the purpose of that is to be basically maximum introspection. There's almost no technology of any kind, no phones, obviously, but also no books, no writing materials, etc. The point is to just be here now, be with your experience, acknowledge your experience, and accept your experience. And with that in mind, it's a really good environment for meditating for 10 days. They do longer courses too, in such a sense that within a few days, you've taken away all the distraction that you can, and the only place for your mind to go at that point is inside itself. And go figure, but that's very difficult at that point because everything starts coming to the surface that you've been holding on to that's so painful. But in that process, you have the opportunity to let go of the things that, have been causing you this pain. So I'm going to go through and talk about this second retreat, which was very, very different from my first retreat. And also for the video I made about my first retreat, I didn't link that, but if you poke around on YouTube, you can probably find it. But just to start, why do a second one of these? Well, first of all, spirituality is a process. There's no end goal. It's not like meditation is a means to an end. It's really just a means. Even if you were to say become fully enlightened, you'd be in a constant state of change. You wouldn't be in a state of, oh, I'm done now. You'd just be in a state of non-resistance to the change. The other thing is they recommend that you do one of these per year because life is just so distracting. And so by going on a 10-day course, you have the opportunity to remove all the distractions, reconnect, and put in the deep work. If you're just going about your daily life, it's really hard to go deeply into your mind and purify yourself there and purify the negativity out of your mind on a deep level. But you go away for 10 days, remove all distractions, all of a sudden you're working pretty deeply in there, and that's what gives you the opportunity to make real progress. And so for me personally, my first course was in March of 2018, and that was the hardest thing I'd ever done at the time, but also the most rewarding. And this is what I would always tell people, and it's, oh sorry, there's my tea, which I already took off. It's all good. So the first course, I would always tell people, it's the hardest thing I've ever done, which it was, but also the most rewarding, which it also was. Those 10 days were quite challenging. And so starting in January of this year, I kind of started feeling negativity creeping back into my mind, and I started wanting to go on another course, another retreat. And for several months, I was like just wanting to do it more and more. And then in June, I met with my boss, and she was like, all right, well, like, what are your long-term plans for this year and like graduating? Because I'm graduating in December. And so I told her, look, I don't really know what I'm going to do, but I know that I want to do another meditation retreat. That's the only thing that I'm sure of. And so she was like, okay, I can respect that. I'll let you go, as long as it clears with all the other people. And it did. So next thing you know, here I am on a meditation retreat. I honestly made the plans to go only a few weeks before, because it was so up in the air what my future would be. And so for all of those reasons, mostly the negativity starting to creep in and myself noticing that I needed to kind of, return and recenter my mind, was why I went on this second retreat. So next thing you know, starting August 14th, flew down to Dallas, Texas, which is the same place where I did my first retreat, and started out. Now, I mentioned I am not going to talk about the structure of the course in this video, just because there's already the other one. For returning students, though, there are 3 extra rules, and those rules are that you can't eat any food after midday, you can't have any bodily decorations or sensual entertainment of any kind, and then you can't have high or luxurious beds. And so these are pretty easy to go by, but adding in the extra rules makes it just a tiny bit harder and forces you to work a little bit harder. For first-time students, there's often a lot of confusion and struggle about, like, can I just go for these 10 days? And so they get fruit in the evening as kind of a little snack, and that can be nicely motivating. In retrospect, I'm actually way happier to have not eaten after midday, just because when you eat that fruit in the evening, it restarts your digestion, and then you get really hungry. Whereas I would not eat for probably like 18 hours at a time, and I would barely eat. I would eat probably, I don't know, maybe like 400 calories tops in that midday meal. But you're just sitting down all day, and you're not really exerting yourself. You're just using your mind. And I never really got hungry. I would notice that my stomach was empty, but I wouldn't feel hungry necessarily. So yeah, and then in terms of bodily decorations, I have like a couple bracelets and stuff that have sentimental value for me. But those I took off just because, I don't really need them. Just eliminate anything that, represents any attachment or that sort of thing. I was kind of trying to let go of my identity to open the way for an open exploration of my own identity. Now, before I continue, it's really important, super, super important, that I make note that the only thing I can really tell you is my own experience with this. And you're totally welcome to ask me questions and all that. But just realize that my answer is my answer and not necessarily like the answer. I'm not a trained teacher in this technique by any means. I'm just a guy who really likes to meditate and that sort of thing. That said, I have had a really positive experience that shares a lot of characteristics with others. But the point is, you need to experience it for yourself for these answers to have any value. All I can do is really give you perspective and kind of show you the way, tell you what I did, maybe inspire you a little bit. But unless you experience it for yourself, it's kind of pointless in that sense. And it's really funny because on the very last day of the course, the silence is broken. And so this new student who had just finished his first course, he came to me and he's like, listen, man, I'm having so many doubts. Like, you're more experienced with this than I am. Like, have you had any experiences? And I'm like, that's a confusing question because, isn't this an experience or isn't this happening right now? And he's like, no, like experiences. And I'm like, I still don't understand, because so people go into some of these techniques and meditation styles expecting that, it'll lead to some really crazy stuff. And I can tell you it does. It can. Meditation has made me hallucinate extremely hard. On this retreat, I experienced total egolessness for a little while. and those are kind of the experiences that he's referring to. But at the same time, the more mundane, everyday, like, what's going on right now, paying more attention to that is as important. You realize that that is as special, which is kind of the beauty of it, to be honest. It's not that, meditation pushes you to some lofty place in your mind, but instead it's all about just appreciating what's here at every level of your mind. So in that sense, I have had both kinds of experiences that he's referring to, but again, I think I'm finding that the most special experiences are just the normal ones, not the like hallucinating after a really crazy meditation and stuff, which again has happened to me, but it's not what it's all about. Anyway, continuing on. So here's how this is going to go. I'm going to first talk very briefly about the theory of Vipassana meditation and a little bit of mindfulness and diving into that. Here, I'm going to put this down for a little bit. And then I will specifically go through my 10-day retreat and tell you about some of the kind of ridiculous things that happened and the things that I encountered. But first, the theory of Vipassana meditation. So Vipassana, the literal translation of Vipassana, or the literal meaning of it, is to see things as they really are, or to observe things as they really are. And so in doing so, this is a technique that's meant to eradicate suffering at the deepest level of the mind. And so what that kind of refers to is this idea that the surface level of your mind is constantly in flux. Every day there's so many stimuli, you get lost in this thought, lost in that thought, and it's really, really distracting, and you don't really have much peace there. The idea is that that's the effect and not the cause. So if you want to solve the problem of distraction and, never being at peace and, feeling this emotion and that emotion, you need to go into the deeper levels of your mind and eradicate the cause of suffering there. And so that's essentially what this meditation technique does. The point is to simultaneously develop awareness and equanimity. So the awareness is what lets you go deeper into your mind, and then the equanimity is what lets you let go of things that you find there. The other thing is you're supposed to have this awareness and equanimity specifically to the sensations of the body. And there's so much theory that could get wrapped into this, and I'm kind of debating if I want to talk about it. I guess it's the realization that all thoughts and perceptions and all that stuff comes down to, or is very closely tied with a reaction that you're subconsciously doing to the sensations of your body. So, for example, if you feel good, that means that there's probably somewhere on your body a good feeling that you're subconsciously reacting to. If you feel pain or you feel angry or that sort of thing, there's probably a sensation of pain or solidity or that sort of thing somewhere on your body. And then it's your reaction to that sensation that causes the feeling that you experience. So because of this, you want to develop an awareness specifically of the sensations and an equanimity to the sensations. So meditation, a lot of the time, people think it's about clearing your mind, and in one sense it is, but it's more about listening to the contents of the mind and not reacting to them. You do that, but on a physical level. You notice the physical manifestation of thoughts rather than the mental manifestation of thoughts. That might sound really strange, but it's actually happening all the time, and it's not that hard to observe once you kind of learn how to do it. But yeah. And in observing things as they really are and diving into your own mind, I think what you essentially accomplish is, you don't do this sort of thing to change yourself. You do it to kind of discover yourself and explore yourself. You're looking for what's underneath all of this constant change at the surface level, and if you develop your mind and develop in this technique, you really do gain that capability, which is kind of the beauty of it. Now, before I talk about my own experience, something that's really interesting about mindfulness that one book I was reading pointed out to me. The author is Jack Kornfield. If you're interested about mindfulness and that sort of thing, definitely check out Jack Kornfield. He's a fantastic author, and actually he teaches Vipassana. But the point that he makes is that the mind comes in layers, and so as you're diving into the mind, you're bound to experience all of these layers, and you need to let them go as you go. But there's so many things going on in there, and you're bound to experience them all if you make an honest, attempt to penetrate deep into your mind. So that's essentially what happened to me on this retreat. My first retreat was kind of floundering around on the surface level in comparison to this one. On this retreat, I was working very hard to just go deeper and deeper no matter what I saw. And I saw some pretty crazy things, and that's what I'll tell you about now. And so I'll go through, for the most part, day by day, just touch briefly on which which feelings and things were happening on each day. But overall notes on my experience was that I just worked really hard. This second retreat was way more intense than the first in every single way. And because of that, it was now the hardest thing that I've ever done and the most rewarding thing that I've ever done. I used to say that about my first retreat. Now it's way more true of this second retreat. Way harder, way more rewarding, but quite probably the best 10 days of my life. And I'm so grateful. I feel so fantastic after this experience. But yeah, so layers of the mind. In we go. So the first couple days, I've kind of grouped together. So the first 3 days before you practice Vipassana, you practice Anapana meditation, which is single point of focus on the breath on a very small area. The point of this is to develop your awareness such that your mind will be able to focus better and penetrate deeper into your mind more effectively. So for those first 3 days, you're not really exploring the sensations and you're not really learning as much. You're more just developing your capability. And because of that, I was mostly dealing with kind of surface level things. I was mostly just frustrated and kind of tired. I would fall asleep from time to time. But on the more surface levels of the mind, this meditation is actually way easier. Once you start going in there is when it gets really hard. But on the more surface levels of the mind, pain isn't as apparent. Both emotional and physical pain, that is, and that sort of thing. And so the big question for me on this retreat was whether I'd be able to sit half lotus the whole time. On my first retreat, I was sitting just normal cross-legged, on a little meditation cushion. But after about 4 days or 5 days, my back was in so much pain. And of course, the pain is actually just a manifestation of your mind. It's actually all in your mind. As you explore these things, your aversion towards experiencing them manifests as pain, and so then you work with the pain. But that said, on my first retreat, the back pain was just so intense that they gave me a little back rest. That was pretty cool. It helped. But on this retreat, I said, no, I know it's all in my mind. I'm going to work with it. So no back rest, and I'm going to push myself to sit half lotus, which is like this, essentially. It's kind of hard in this chair, but with one leg on top of the other, as opposed to crossed. And then full lotus. I can do it, but I don't really want to. But full lotus would be both legs crossed over each other, inwards. Anyway, I got kind of tangential. The point is, on the more surface levels of the mind, the pain isn't as severe, and I actually sat on the very first day at 4:30 in the morning, I sat for like 90 minutes in that position without moving posture at all. And that's actually the longest that I've ever sat. So I was like, this is pretty cool. Like, I've made some progress here. But in retrospect, it's just because I was more at the surface level of the mind. As I went deeper in, I couldn't repeat that because it was just too painful. Anyway, so during those first few days, though, developing the attention, you do this, you do 3 group sittings in a day. There's one in the morning, one in the afternoon, one in the evening. And so the morning one is from 8 to 9, the afternoon is from 2:30 to 3:30, and the evening is from 6 to 7. And every single day, I sat for that 6 to 7 without breaking posture, which was really cool. I didn't expect that, actually. I expected it to take a few days for me to get into it, but no, from the first to the last day. And during that session, which was consistently my best session, I remember having the thought, like, just keep it quiet in here. Just keep it quiet in here, and the rest will work itself out. And that was where my attention was focused. I was just trying to keep my mind quiet, not really listen to it, not propagate thought. That's really the problem with attention, is one thought pops up, and then we react to it, and all these other thoughts pop up. Whereas I was just like, okay, let's just keep it quiet in here. Oh, thought pops up. I'm just going to keep my attention on my breath, and so on and so forth. The other thing is, this is kind of a weird point. I've never been a big believer in like chakras and energy centers and stuff. But on this retreat, I started experiencing some like chakra effects, which was kind of interesting. I'd never experienced that sort of thing before, but for those first like 4 to 5 days, my throat, people call it the throat chakra, was opening. I wouldn't really have any reason for it, but like stuff would like come out, and solidity would break apart in the throat, and I would have to like clear my throat at just the most random times. And with that in mind, I'm kind of a believer that maybe there is some truth to the throat chakra and that sort of thing, which is kind of interesting. I'd never really, I don't know, because people hear the word chakra and they think like, I don't know, they like astrology, and like they associate with it with what they interpret as a less serious form of mindfulness, perhaps. And maybe I had made that own association, because you picture someone like, oh yeah, I just gotta clear my chakras, man, and then I'll be happy. And you think like, this person's just making up games in their head. But I think there is some truth to it, at least a little bit. Of course, how you approach it is very important. Anyway, total tangent, whatever. That was the first like 3 days, developing attention, developing awareness. Just keep it quiet. Just keep it quiet in the mind. And so then on the 4th day, you begin practicing Vipassana, specifically, no more Anapana. And that's when you begin moving the point of focus around the body. And in doing so, you encounter sensations, which are manifestations of the mental contents. And the goal is to be equanimous towards those sensations, to not react to the sensations. And in doing so, they will continue to manifest and release themselves from the body, and essentially you let go of what you had been holding on to. Easier said than done. So on that day 4, the things that began manifesting were kind of the outer layers of pain in my mind. One of the first ones that I encountered was frustration, tiredness. I was just like so angry and so restless. Oh my. And that sort of thing. There were like a solid 2 hours when I just could not meditate. I would like get in posture, go for maybe like 5 minutes, get so distracted, react so harshly to the anger, and break my posture, and then be frustrated for a few minutes, try to get back into posture, repeat, get angry, break it again. Eventually I was just sitting there like, what the heck am I supposed to do here, you know? So actually the next day I met with the teacher and asked him, like, how do I deal with this? And I'll come back to that. The other thing that I experienced, and this is, you know, just being honest with, you know, the layers that I encountered. Very interestingly, I encountered a layer of pretty intense like sexual desire, and I kind of worked through that in a meditation session. So all these distractions started popping into my head, and I'll leave it to your imagination what that was all about. But you know, that was one of the things I was dealing with. And that actually, again, speaks to the chakras, which is, you know, I've never experienced these chakras so much before. But there's one very closely associated with, like, your sexual energy, and that you know, that the opening of that chakra lets out all these emotions of, you know, desire in that sense, lust. But, you know, thankfully that passed, and I was able to work with more internal issue. Well, I don't know. I shouldn't rate my issues, but things that I'd rather work on, I think. Speaking of which, so day 5, I was working on mostly anger and that restlessness. So I mentioned on day 4 there was that session where I just couldn't do it. I was just so angry, and I was so reactive to the anger, and it would create more anger, and so on and so forth. I met with the teacher. I'm like, hey, like, I have all this anger. What do? I can't meditate. And he's like, no, you have negativity. There's no need for negativity here. You know, your negativity is going to hold you back. So, you know, whatever happens, like, just don't get upset about it. Which is really good advice, because what kept happening would be that, you know, I would get angry at myself for being angry. And, like, what's the point of that? Then you just stay angry. So after he told me these things, I was like, okay, yeah, I need to not react to this. And I worked on that for a few days. It didn't happen instantly, but eventually I was able to get over that, which I'm really thankful for. But yeah, the anger often manifested as, like, restlessness and frustration. It would often manifest as intolerance of other people. So, you know, these retreats are a very meditative atmosphere in a sense that it's so quiet, and you know, you can't look at anyone or touch anyone or any of that, or talk to anyone, obviously, but you are still around a lot of people. And so what would happen was, you know, say someone coughs or is, like, sitting and making a lot of noise in their seat, you know, your mind lashes out at them and is just like, shut up, you know, I'm trying to meditate here. And so that sort of intolerance is the manifestation of your anger. It's nothing more than that, you know, like, it's not this person's fault. And quite honestly, I'm sure I was causing about as much distraction as anyone else, but obviously just not aware of it. Yeah, like, some people I would see and just be like, I don't like this guy, you know, I don't like this guy. The dude who sat behind me, I don't know why, I just didn't like him. The dude who sat right next to me, too, reminded me of this other guy, and I'm like, I don't like this guy, like, eh. But, you know, I eventually I realized, like, this is just me being angry, and by the end of the 10 days, I was like, I like this dude. You know, this guy is working really hard, like, I have a lot of respect for this guy. But yeah, so those were the things I was dealing with on day 5. I mentioned before, though, that 6 to 7 p.m. session, I was just doing well every single day. And I think I started realizing that my equanimity would be, it would be at a different point at every single day, but it would be consistent. So in the morning, I would have a fair amount of equanimity, not too much, but not too little. In the afternoon, I would have my minimum, where I would meditate as long as I could, get frustrated, you know, break posture, and then start all over again. But my equanimity wasn't very high at those points. And then in the evening, every single day at 6 p.m. was when it was highest. That allowed me to really succeed in those 6 to 7 p.m. sessions. Yeah. So that was pretty cool. So no matter how hard my afternoon was and how much I freaked out at myself and got angry, you know, I would return and be equanimous at 6 p.m. So that's day 5. We're already halfway through this 10-day thing. The first 5 days were like kind of the preparation, it seems like, and then the second 5 days I worked my butt off, and that's where things got a lot more interesting. So, layers of the mind so far. We had some tiredness, sexual desire, anger. Day 6 we hit a huge layer of like depression. And on my first retreat, basically just cried the whole time. I'll be honest with you, I was just crying so much. On this one, I didn't really have too much of a problem with it. I wasn't just overwhelmed the whole time. You know, I was really working and able to be with my state of mind as opposed to just like constantly overwhelmed. But that said, I did hit a point on day 6 where I was very depressed and where I was very overwhelmed with just sadness and that form of negativity. I should point out that all of these emotions are just different faces of negativity that manifest in the body. But again, the point is to purify the negativity out and deal with it that way. So I start feeling a lot of depression on day 6. I cried a bunch. It's fine, whatever. It's good to cry. But it's really interesting. This was a really interesting thing that happened, though, was that there was a beauty, there's like an overwhelming beauty that I was experiencing that became distracting. Well, let me just follow my notes, because that's probably the best. Yeah. So at this point, the amount of pain I was feeling basically was destroying my body. You know, and it's funny that we don't pay attention to it, but this is constantly happening in ourselves, even when we don't pay attention to it. So it's really nice to acknowledge that, like, okay, I'm deep in my mind, and no wonder I'm finding how much this hurts. But it hurt a lot. You know, my body had become a battlefield at that point. And part of me wanted to achieve so much on this retreat and, you know, get something really meaningful out of it and reach this mental state or that mental state. And I just broke down at one point. I was like, this isn't about reaching a mental state, because that'll be just as impermanent as anything. This is about purifying out the negativity, getting rid of the craving for that mental state, maybe. And so as I'm thinking this, like, this poetry starts composing itself in my head, and I'm like totally overwhelmed with sadness and like all this stuff. I had these really strong memories, just of like my parents fighting when I was a kid, and that brought up some really strong emotion. And for their sake, I won't talk about it, but you know, as I'm going deeper into my mind, in the back of my mind, I'm still thinking like, okay, I want to let this all go and get somewhere. I want to achieve. But my body is just so destroyed at this point. It's so much pain. There were times when I couldn't even breathe. Like, the amount of compression and pressure on my chest literally made it like impossible for me to breathe. And that was kind of scary, actually. But yeah, and so I was getting wrecked in every way possible. And so I started realizing like, oh yeah, and so this poetry starts writing itself in my head, and I can't help but notice the poetry and think, oh wow, that's pretty good. Usually I don't write poetry this good, you know, but it became distracting because of that, you know. I want to hold on to these thoughts. I want to hold on to these this creativity, which is not really the way you want to approach this sort of thing, because you want to let go of everything, and you want to trust that even after you've let it go, you're working deep enough into your mind that inspiration will always be there. So really, you get in your own way if you start thinking, oh, this is so beautiful. And so from that point onward, I started having these really overwhelming experiences of beauty, where I would just be like, you know, looking at a sunrise and just be like, oh my God, like, you know, just like totally overwhelmed, totally just captivated. But again, to the point where it would be distracting. And so I noticed that this would prevent me from progressing any further if I let it. Point of the story is, beauty too can be a manifestation of negativity, because it's a manifestation of judgment. You know, it's saying that this moment is more beautiful than the others. This feeling is more beautiful than the others. When in reality, you're trying to get to the point where all feelings are equally beautiful, and they're not. They are beautiful. You know, you don't have to convince yourself. If you don't judge them, you'll realize this. But if you do judge them, you'll notice that some of them are, but not all of them. So you want to get to the point where you notice that all of them are, by going deeper and by not judging. Now, starting that day 6, I began working freakishly hard. I would still, have that low point in my equanimity in the afternoons, but I would work through it as best as I could. I was getting over the frustration at this point, so I, say I needed to break posture. In my mind, I'd be like, okay, take a quick break, like, it's fine, don't worry about it. And I would take like a minute break and then pick up right where I left off and not be distracted, which was where I wanted to be, You take away that negative reaction and it lets you work a lot harder. So, yeah. And so from this, a new sort of calm began emerging after the storm in the afternoon. In the afternoon, every single day, I would just get wrecked by the meditation. It would just beat me in every way that it could. But as I became okay with that, and as I became non-reactive to that, I started to be very calm afterwards. So that 6 to 7 p.m. session, I maintained very good equanimity. You get really stiff sitting cross-legged for so many hours a day, and it really hurts. And I got to the point where I wouldn't recover at all between any points in the day. It wouldn't be until I went to bed that my body would recover from the meditation. So I would start meditating and already be in a ton of pain. And then, fast forward 40 minutes or an hour, and that's become a lot of pain. And, but it's a really good way to learn and to challenge yourself, because you realize that the pain is in your head, but no matter how painful it is, you have a similar level of equanimity. Meaning, the magnitude of the pain doesn't really matter. If you say to yourself, I'm not going to move during a tiny bit of pain, it's equally important to say, I'm not going to move during a lot of pain. And so I would, even despite this massive pain, I would be able to sit for a long time, which is a really good result, really good progress. And so with that, we come to the last 3-4 days. Days 7 to 10, really days 7 to 9 are the ones I'm going to talk about first here. And on these 3 days, I started experiencing some really ridiculous things. This was when it got really crazy. So inside of the depression and the tiredness and the beauty and the achievement, I started coming to the point where I was just dealing with the bottom level, the ego. And it wasn't just ego. I was also dealing with love in terms of selfish love versus selfless love. And I was dealing on a very fundamental level with the desires of the mind and the aversions of the mind. And it's really hard for me to explain what this felt like. All I can say is you have to experience it, and you have to try it for yourself to understand. But I've worked past all the bullcrap. I've worked past sexual desire, anger, depression, even beauty at this point. And now I'm just working with my ego, and I'm just wrestling with my ego and letting my ego destroy me, and in the process destroy itself. And same with the cravings and the aversions. I was letting these things out such that they could be released. The thing that started popping up, though, was doubt. And this ended up being what kind of beat me, I think. Well, beat me. It became the most challenging thing. The doubt that I was maybe worthy to continue progressing along this path, or the doubt that I was even doing the right thing this whole time. Maybe the past 6 or 7 days of utter and complete chaos and pain, maybe it was all for nothing because I've been doing this wrong. These doubts really hurt. and these doubts really caused fear, and all of this stuff is manifesting within the framework of the body. And so because of that, sometimes, you're aware of a sensation, and then you have a blind spot, and you've reached this blind spot, and it's terrifying. It's like the universe doesn't exist anymore, And I remember meditating one day, just, going along, and all of a sudden, and I probably scared the crap out of everyone around me, but I was freaked out. That was like one of the scariest moments of my life, and I can't really explain why. Just the fact that like maybe this was all done in vain, but manifesting itself like in my mind, like just hitting me, and oh god, that was terrifying. But in the process, I worked through that, So that's how these things go. You have to really feel the pain if you want to get over it. You have to really feel the doubt if you get over it. It's a very active form of mindfulness. Doubt would also manifest as tiredness. So sometimes I would want to keep meditating and just like start falling asleep. And that's my body saying, or that's my mind saying like, I know you want to do this, but I won't let you, and that just takes time to get over. As a returning student, you do something called continuity of practice. They say that continuity of practice is the secret to success. And so what that means is between meditations, you essentially keep meditating. You keep your awareness of the breath, or you keep your awareness of sensations in the body, even when you're not, on the pillow meditating. And so one thing that started to happen to me on day 7 was something that I call meditative no sleep, which is essentially I go to bed, but the sensations are still so crazy in my body, and like, how could I possibly sleep with all of this going on? And so what you do is you just meditate on the sensations, and it gives rest to the mind, and you're still lying down, and it gives rest to the body, and you awaken feeling extremely refreshed. Actually, you awaken as if you had slept all night, even though you hadn't slept a minute. And so I did sleep some, but I would do this meditative no sleep practice for a couple hours, maybe about an hour, on night 7. On night 8, which I'll come back to in a second, I didn't do it as much. And then day 9 I did again. So from day 7, day 8, and day 9, this thing started happening. So I mentioned before the afternoon sessions, I would push myself really hard and usually fail pretty hard and just try to be okay with the failure. By day 7, I was okay with the failure. I would still fail, but I was okay with it. And then at 5, I had completely calmed down. So you meditate from 1 to 5, and then there's a break from 5 to 6. And I would fail from 1 to 5 consistently, just worse and worse. It hurt, but I would be more and more okay with it. And then from 5 to 6, I started to experience total egolessness, and I can't even what would happen was my mind would be completely silent, like not even a single thought. And so there's these walking trails in the back of the center through the woods and that sort of thing. And so I'd walk along the trail, and again, my mind would be completely silent, and I would just kind of dissolve. I'd be only aware of the experience and the fact that it is experienced, and I would be paying no attention whatsoever to the fact that I'm here, or, Of course, I would feel the sensations and the vibrations, essentially, at this point, of my own body, but they were just in a continuous field with all these other things. And that's about as good as I could describe it, but it's really something that has to be experienced. But that was my first taste of egolessness, I think, and it was extremely pleasant and so relaxing, but kind of odd at first. I was like, I didn't expect it. I got out of the meditation hall one day, and I had just struggled so much. I'm just walking around, and I'd never felt so calm. and that was amazing. The other thing, the other thing is you feel all these pains, and in a lot of ways, when you let them go, you're letting go of things that had been affecting your body subconsciously. And so actually my posture right now isn't very good. But after some of these meditations where I would feel so much pain in my back, my posture would be impeccable. I would have perfect posture in my back. I'd be standing like, and I'd look in the mirror and be like, damn, like, it looks good when you stand up so straight, and I was like almost proud of myself, because it's like you sort out the knots that you'd been holding onto physically, and once the knots are untied, you can, your body just wants to be in good posture. Your back wants to be straight. And that was pretty cool. So meditation itself actually can improve posture, which I guess you might expect just through practice. But it's not because of the practice, though. It's because the bad posture was a manifestation of your mind that now you've come to terms with and let go of. Once you've let go of it, you have good posture again. And that was really cool. Yeah, so from 5 to 6, on days 7, 8, and 9, I would feel really intense egolessness, and it was really, really cool. Yes, hang on, see more. Whoa, okay, there's a lot here. Brian says, it sounds like a major theme is finding the beauty of every mundane moment, and you were also working on eliminating negativity. Did you find any encounters or value in looking for the beauty of negativity? It sounds like the objective is to destroy negativity. Would that qualify as well as judging thoughts? Just judging them to be less important in the same way beauty judges to be more important. Hang on, I gotta read this last sentence again. It sounds like the objective is to destroy negativity. Would that qualify as well as judging thoughts? Yeah, I think, yeah, exactly. I think the point is to get rid of all judgment, essentially. And in getting rid of that judgment, you do see the beauty in the negativity, for sure. Because you see the beauty in just everything, the fact that it's experienced. It's actually a really good point, because in a lot of accounts of spirituality and that sort of thing, you read about people who struggle and then have a total breakthrough. And so this part of me that really wanted to achieve knew that, eventually I'm going to hit this breakthrough, and it'll all be easy after that. And of course, by holding on to that thought, I was unable to get this breakthrough. But that's totally fine. But once you can see the beauty in both the good and the bad, and you've stopped judging it, then everything must become so easy. You can accept both the good and the bad, and look on both of them with the eye of, I want this. I want this energy to be freed, and I want to let go of this thing that I had been holding on to. So yeah, exactly. The negative is as beautiful as the positive. It's all beautiful. That's the point. It's all beautiful. And the deeper in the mind that you go, the more you realize that it is all really just breathtaking. And that's why this retreat was so good, because I went really deeply in my mind and let go of a lot. And the way that that's manifesting now that I've kind of come back to the surface in everyday life is that I'm just appreciating everything so much more. And I'm very pleased. I'm very pleased and very okay with things as they are. So, yeah. But yeah. So everything was getting really intense those last few days. I mentioned the doubt before. So in the evening of every single day, there's like a lecture where the teacher, SN Goenka, or Goenkaji, basically talks about, what you're doing, and he talks about the theory behind it and all that stuff. And on day 8, he says, you need both awareness and equanimity. And you need, like wings of a bird, you need them both at the same amount. You need them both to the same length. And if you have just awareness and no equanimity, or just equanimity and no awareness, all of your efforts will go to waste. So I mentioned before, at this point I'm dealing very strongly with doubt, which in retrospect is totally silly because I had progressed to such a level that I had never been to before. But I doubted that I had made any progress, and I doubted that what I was doing was, at all, And so he says this, and it just sets me off, like, oh God, I've been just wasting my time. Like, I was freaked out. Oh man, that put me in such a terrible place when he was like, if you have one and not the other, then you're just playing games of sensation, essentially. You're just trying to feel the good feelings and not actually being a genuine spiritual practitioner. If you're just trying to feel these cool feelings, then you're not going to get anywhere on this path. You need to have a genuine desire to grow and to continue letting go as you go. And so this hits so close to home for me because I'm like, oh God, I must have been doing that this whole time. Like, no wonder I haven't had this breakthrough or whatever. And I was so agitated and so freaked out, and I couldn't sleep, and I just I don't know. In retrospect, it was really good for me to hear that because I then overcame it. I then examined myself. Like, do I have equanimity? Do I have awareness? And so day 10, they tell you, we're going to break the silence and you won't be able to work nearly as seriously. Day 9 is the last day of serious work. So on the morning of day 9, there's this 2-hour session in the morning. And so awareness, usually you measure by how, what the size is of the scanning area as you go. So a big scanning area, so, you don't need very much awareness to feel a sensation in that area. But if you use a very small one, it becomes a lot harder to be aware of what's happening on your body in such a small area. So in the morning session, I kind of wanted to test myself. And I just go around my body scanning pinpoints, just pinpoints, and seeing if I can feel everywhere. It's when you reach a blind spot that you say, okay, I'm unaware. And then you kind of wait for a minute, and usually something will appear. But pinpoints. It took me about 2 hours to cover the whole body, but I felt everywhere. So that was a good sign. I was like, okay, I guess I am pretty aware. And in terms of equanimity, I was able to be all right with the, I was able to be all right with the sensations everywhere and keep going. I never really got frustrated or angry or anything. So I figured, okay, I have equanimity too. So then I was like, all right, I guess I'm okay. I guess I don't need these doubts so much, which was a good feeling. But then in the morning session, I'm still trying to achieve. So on day 9, they introduced this concept of bhanga. And bhanga, literal translation, is dissolution of the mental and physical structure simultaneously. And it's the highest state that you can reach in this form of meditation. It's a totally egoless place. It's actually a timeless place. Oh, I forgot to mention, I started having time dilation hallucinations in my meditation. I'll come back to that in a second. But bhanga means you have completely evaporated, essentially. And it means that everything that you had been holding on to and reacting to has evaporated, and you're just a free intake and outtake of energy. It's just flowing through you naturally. And so there's different kind of stages of entering bhanga. And so this whole 10 days I'd been thinking, I really want to reach bhanga. I really want to get to this point. And that's the achievement that I had been striving for, to tell myself, oh, I'm so great, I can do this, I'm the best. And so, of course, that would hold me back from it because that would manifest. But anyway, the morning session I had usually been pretty equanimous for, and I had sat through it fine. And so on this last day, I'm like, okay, this is the last day. This is the last morning session I get to do. Let's try to make bhanga happen. And of course, this is not something that you can make happen. It's something that you need to be completely stable-minded for, and then it happens naturally. And when I say completely, I mean completely, at the most fundamental level. So I try to make it happen, and of course it doesn't. But I get pretty far. I'm like, all right, this is pretty cool. This feels good. And so then the next session from like 9 to 11, I totally lost equanimity. I was like, it was hilarious. It got to the point where it was so funny. I was just so like frustrated and angry, and my body was just falling apart on me again, and I was just getting so angry about it. And so I started listening to my ego and just observing this chatter that's going on with all these crazy sensations, and just started screaming inside my head, like all this anger identified itself as anger. It's like, I am anger, like fuck you, all this stuff. And it just kept yelling at me, and in a very humorous way, because I was aware that it wasn't me and I was just observing it, but I was using it to encourage me to keep going. But usually during meditations you don't want to do that. You want to just be silent in your mind. But I let it go and just let it yell and yell and yell. And so at one point, I broke posture, and my anger is shouting at me like, this is a war. Are you going to be are you gonna be a soldier, or are you gonna be a little bitch? And so I immediately get back into posture and just like keep meditating, like, no, I'm gonna fight, I'm gonna do it. But it was just so funny to let that go and just let out all this energy that had built up for like 9 days of all this like it was so funny. And then thankfully after that meditation ended, my mind slowed down again. But that was it was a really funny way to observe what I was feeling. But later in the day I had the difficulty in the afternoon again. No surprise there. I was like, I'm just gonna get through this. Like, if I need to move, I'll move, like whatever. And it was good. Then the evening. So the evening is kind of the last serious session, the whole retreat. And I'm thinking to myself, all right, this is it. Like, either it's gonna happen or it won't. And I've kind of come to terms with that at this point. I'm like, listen, if it doesn't happen, like, that's fine. And so I'm going through, doing all the instructions, reached kind of the first stages where I'm dissolving solid sensations into subtle vibrations. That's kind of the first stage. And so you so to just briefly explain Banga. So usually when you're meditating, you have kind of solidified sensations, so like a solidified pain or a solidified craving, etc. And those things will be kind of unpleasant if you're reacting to them. And if you're not reacting to them, of course, they're not all that unpleasant. And you've realized that these things change too. The point is to develop wisdom in impermanence. And by acknowledging their impermanence and not reacting to them on that grounds, they eventually fade away and dissolve. And so if you do it right, they'll dissolve into subtle vibrations, and you just have vibrations all over the body, which you can freely move your attention through. Okay, and this is very pleasant, so you have to be careful because you're also not supposed to crave, If you start craving the good, then that's also a reaction. So the point is to get rid of reactions. The point is not to just feel good things, but it's to get rid of the reaction to them. Now, if you do this in every single part of your body, your entire body becomes a field of subtle vibrations. And from there, you can enter the state of Banga. Well, kind of. So then, if your entire outer body becomes a field of subtle vibrations, you start scanning inside the body. You start looking for solidity underneath the skin, going throughout, moving your attention through every single volumetric, cubic centimeter of your body. And if all of that is not solid, and all of that is subtle vibrations, then you've effectively dissolved the body at that point. And what you then do is you can test, if I just place my attention here on a tiny area, anywhere on the body, you feel like an electric current just rush through the entire rest of the field. No matter where you poke it, essentially, you agitate the whole thing, like, yeah. And so what happens is you then begin to meditate on the spinal cord. And so the spinal cord obviously is where a lot of nervous system things are going on. And this is really interesting because by meditating on the spinal cord, you effectively increase the electric current through it. and increase the intensity of the energy everywhere in your body. And so this becomes the meditation, where you've completely dissolved, no solidity anywhere, inside the body, outside the body, etc. You've just become a field of vibration. And yeah, that's, and you realize that it's a bodiless state. Because, where does it begin? Where does it end? It doesn't, is the point. It's also an egoless state because none of it has anything to do with you. If you could not enter this state with an ego, it's just fundamentally it wouldn't make sense, because the ego is a manifestation in the mind of solidity, and so at this point you've overcome that. So anyway, that's what I was going for all week. It's said to be ridiculously pleasant, and so naturally I'm thinking that sounds pretty cool, also a high state of meditation. But the Buddha warns people against this because it's so pleasant that you can attach a craving to it, and that'll prevent you from reaching the next level. The goal of this meditation, again, is not to reach one mental state or another mental state, but to feel equanimity and to be equanimous, and to be aware. And the state of enlightenment is not a state of bodilessness per se, but it is a state of equanimity. And so that's why you're trying to develop that. Anyway, long tangent, that's what Banga is. One day, perhaps, I will feel it. Doesn't really matter to me nearly as much anymore. But in this last session, I am okay, this is when it's going to happen, if it's going to happen. And this was consistently my best session of the day, too. So I was maybe I'll have a shot here. And so I start dissolving the body, and I broke up these massive, painful sensations in my back that had been bugging me all week, and they dissolved into nothingness and subtle vibration, and just became so pleasant. And I was oh, this is great. I'm doing great. And so I go all throughout the body, and I'm dissolving everything. And so there's no solidity anywhere. And so then I reach this point where I'm dang, I'm fucking doing it, And this sensation appears in my right foot that I had not felt the whole week. I had never really felt pain in this part of my body before. And a really strong pain pops up, and a really strong, solid sensation pops up there. And I was okay, this must be my craving for the Banga. And I sat with it for a while. I was all right, just trying to let that dissolve itself. At the end of the day, it didn't. Time ran out, meditation ended. It's fine. At the end, I'm really happy that I made it that far, to the point where I had gotten rid of every single thing that I had been dealing with all week and found something new underneath all of it and started working with that. If that's not progress, I don't know what is. So I was really happy with my progress. I was this was a really wonderful 10 days. I realize now, and I realized during the 10 days on an intellectual level, but now on a much more experiential level of wisdom, I'm it's not about just reaching this one mental state. That's not what this is about. So, I'm very pleased. Okay, that was a long tangent. I will be wrapping up pretty quickly here. But just to finish out, so day 10 is a kind of a different style day. You've finished practicing Vipassana for the most part at this point. Day 10 is when the silence breaks and you begin practicing metta, which is compassion, or selfless love. And so by breaking the silence, you gain the opportunity to talk to all these wonderful people who you've been alongside, and everyone is essentially in bloom. Everyone has just made it through this super challenging experience that they've all grown so much from, and just sharing it together. And everyone's so friendly, and I'm just thinking to myself, I want to talk to all these people, and everyone I talked to was so wonderful. Is really great. And people who I had, during the week been intolerant towards, thinking I don't like this guy, he's got a weird vibe, and I knew intellectually that this is just my head being annoying, but at this point I went and talked to him, such and such, and just heard about him and his experience and his life, and just had so much love for all these people. I was experiencing so much love, and I still am. but it's just, I feel so healed, you know, and you let go of the intolerance at that point. You know, you just feel compassion. At the end of the day, like, why meditate? You know, what's the point? There's kind of two reasons. The first is, well, it's really just one reason, actually. But it's achieved in different ways. There's essentially two modes in life: working for yourself and working for other people. You know, and a lot of this meditation stuff is working on yourself. By purifying yourself, you become more able to love. But then, what do you do with that love? You work for other people, you know, and once you've purified your own reactions to, like, your own resistances to working for others, then you're really able to serve other people. And I think that's, like, one of the highest forms of love. Interestingly, like, in our minds, when we love, we have so much attachment. When we think we love, so to speak, but it's really just attachment. It's like, I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine, sort of thing, or like expecting something in return. You know, that's not real love, because true love is just love that gives with no expectation of anything in return, you know? And by purifying your own minds, you can come to the point where you're capable of that. But until you purify your own minds, it's hard, you know? Anyway, the point is, even though all of this work is so much done internally, you do still need other people to be able to for that work to be meaningful. And on this 10th day, you know, the silence breaks, everyone is hanging out, and it's just the most beautiful experience, because you get to serve others and to want to listen to other people and to want to help other people and just to get to know and all that stuff. And because of this, the idea of donation and service is very important, because at the end of the course, you know, everyone's cleaning up their own room. Most of the people who work for these things are like all volunteers, and they want all the help they can get. So I volunteered to like help clean one of the bathrooms and to help clean the kitchen and where the servers are. And so as I'm cleaning, I'm just thinking to myself, like, you know, may this toilet be beautiful for the next person who comes here. You know, may they grow. And I'm cleaning the house where the servers live, and I'll come back to that in a second. Well, so the servers are the people who make this all possible. So there's people who meditate for the 10 days, and then there's also people who cook all the food and, you know, do a lot of the cleaning. And they're also there all 10 days, and they meditate a few times a day. But they're there for the purpose of serving all these other people. And so you're essentially amplifying these feelings of service by meditating on them for 10 days. And so as I'm cleaning the servers' quarters, I'm just thinking to myself, like, thank you so much for doing this, and like, may the next people who serve here grow in their perfections of donation and generosity and love, essentially. And you know, not a streak of negativity enters my mind as I'm like cleaning toilets and urinals and stuff. You know, in everyday life, usually I'd be like, oh, like, this is gross or whatever. But not even a single thought of that entered my mind at any point. I was just so positive, like, thank you for giving me the opportunity to give this back and to pay it forward, such that someone else may grow. And that's why, sorry, this is getting very tangential, but that's why it's so important that I share this information, and that it's clear, and that, you know, if anyone has any questions, like, please ask. I will happily, you know, talk to you about any of these things, because that, you know, like, this isn't just for me. Yeah, that's the biggest takeaway here. This is not at all just for me, and that's the feeling that I'm full of right now. And, you know, and in the days and months and weeks to come, like, I'm sure it'll lessen in intensity to some point, and then that's why they recommend, you know, go on one of these per year, essentially. But actually, my next course, I think I'm gonna try to be a server on, because I really want to continue developing these feelings of donation and generosity and helping others do their own work, as opposed to just sitting there and doing my own. you know, those 10 people, or not, sorry, those people who serve, they're there for the 10 days for the purpose of everyone else. They're not there for themselves at all. And that's the beauty in it. Because then on this 10th day, everyone starts talking and everyone's blooming and everyone's so happy. And you just get so much sympathetic joy. You get so much joy, like, I helped make this possible. You know, I helped all of these people grow and be happy, you know, and what better feeling is there than that? You know, I was a part of this. And it's a totally egoless thing. So anyway, I rant and tangent a lot, but serving is a really beautiful thing. And on my next course, I think I'm going to try to be a server because of that. As you start talking to people and, you know, not being, and gaining a little more distraction, naturally you start rising back to the surface level of your mind. So these whole 9 days leading up to this, you were going just deeper and deeper and deeper. You're essentially operating on your brain and pulling out the bad parts, you know, letting go of negativity. But you can't live at the deepest level of your mind in the modern world. You need to come back up, because how could you live that deep with all of this stimulus, all of this distraction? And so now I'm much more at the surface. And so naturally living at the surface, I feel so good that all this stuff deep down has been eradicated. Granted, it's not all been eradicated. You know, it's not like I'm enlightened or anything, but I've made so much progress, and I feel it, and I feel so much love and just equanimity, and I feel very calm again, and it's a beautiful thing. Vipassana is good. Yeah. Now, yes. Sorry, I ranted a lot there. I'm just consulting my notes. Okay, so final notes, and then I'll sign off here. So this retreat, again, was like maybe the best thing I've ever done, like best 10 days of my life. And I think the reason it is that way is because I had no idea I could work as hard as I did. I worked like a freaking maniac, like meditating pretty much every second of the 10 days. And yeah. And like, you know, I reached this point of anger, and I'm like, how do I deal with this? I'm not just reacting to it. I'm like, how do I get past this and like keep going? How do I not react to anger so that I can see what's underneath? You know, I didn't know I could do that, but then I did, you know, and I was like, oh, sweet. And now the anger's gone. Well, it's mostly gone, you know. You've pulled a bunch of it out. Vipassana is a really serious and engaging technique. And this is really important because, you know, mindfulness needs to be a pretty active practice. If you meditate every day but like don't take it very seriously, you shouldn't really expect to see results, because you're just working at the surface level. Unless you go deeper than the surface level, you won't really see any change, because it's really from the bottom of your mind that the negativity starts and rises outwards. It's not the other way around. So essentially, this meditation technique is about dealing with causes and not effects. Because if you deal with the cause, then the effect is, you know, dealt with. And granted, a lot of different techniques will claim that that's what they do. I personally subscribe to Vipassana because it intellectually makes a lot of sense. It experientially makes a lot of sense to me. Experiential wisdom is the highest form of wisdom, side note. Intellectual wisdom is like the second highest, and so on. If you intellectually understand that something works, but if you don't experience it, then it doesn't matter, you know. So you want to develop the experiential wisdom, and that's what this technique is for, to experience this peace, this, you know, this technique, this joy. But yeah, it's really engaging, and whatever level you work at, it's hard. It doesn't matter if you've been doing this for years or if you've been doing it if you just like showed up at a retreat. Either way, the challenge will rise to where you are. I thought I would have an easier time, and in one sense I did, because on my first retreat I wasn't sure if I would be able to make it for 10 days. This retreat I was pretty much sure the whole time that I would make it through, which was what allowed me to work deeper into my mind. But that said, it was way harder in terms of what I was actually doing. the things I was coming across and the things that I was trying to let go of were just so much more painful and like more deeply rooted. Excuse me. But yeah, you get the fruits of your efforts. You know, the point is the law of nature is such that the seed that you plant is the fruit that you get. You know, so if you plant good seeds of honest, sincere practice, then you will receive the fruits of it. As long as you cultivate those seeds, you know, it's all about just knowing which seeds to cultivate and which not to. When you notice yourself reacting with negativity, that's when you're cultivating the wrong seeds, and you get the fruits of negativity, bad things happening in the life. When you cultivate the good seeds, you get the good fruit. It was really interesting to see that doubt was underlying all of this for me, and for a lot of other people who I talked to, actually. Because you want to have that sincere effort, and you want to have those fruits, but part of you thinks, like, maybe I'm not worthy, maybe this isn't the right technique, you know, maybe I'm doing it wrong. And I think doubt plays such an important role because it forces you to be sincere, and like it forces you to be honest, because if you didn't feel this doubt or you didn't acknowledge this doubt, then you'd be lying to yourself. I think it's such a natural thing. I think every emotion that I felt on this retreat was already there. I just discovered it and uncovered it and went underneath. And so doubt is very, very close to the center of all of this for me. And that, you know, I have to acknowledge that if I want to work through it. That said, after leaving and acknowledging all these benefits and like great experiences that I've had, there's not a doubt in my mind that this was a fantastic experience and that I've worked through all this stuff and really grown, and that's very pleasing. This is just a very quick point, but you know, I talked to a lot of people on these retreats are from like South Asia, which have an undercurrent in their culture of spirituality. So, for example, even in India, not even in India. In India, you have kind of an undercurrent of meditation and all these different cultures coming together to like grow spiritually. Even if it's not always practiced perfectly, like it's a very aware, their culture is very aware of the spiritual quest and encourages it. Look at America, and it's not quite the same way. We have such a capitalist culture, and we all long for, you know, material things, and this way of immaterial and peace and, you know, just being happy with what we have has almost been lost here. And I think because of that, America is a really important place to practice spirituality if we want to reach our full potential. You know, I think if we have both the capitalist side and the spiritual side, there's nothing we won't be able to accomplish, because we'll be humble enough to accept that, you know, everything changes, but also strive to grow, and strive to achieve. And by having both sides of the coin like that, I think it's just like really powerful. Sorry, I phrased all that really weird, but hopefully the idea came across. Basically, America, since we've lost spirituality, it's even better than ever when we regain it here. You know, because in a lot of other parts in the world, it hasn't really been lost, and, you know. And so now I am returning to the world. I remember after my first retreat, it was like a pretty unpleasant return. I was just overstimulated and overwhelmed like all the time for a few weeks. And I'm feeling a little bit of that, but not nearly as much this time around, which is good. I'm just happy to be doing what I'm doing, you know, happy to play music again. Oh, so happy to play music again. I've been playing so much guitar and just enjoying it so much. And even my job, I really like, and I've been happy to go to work and like see all my friends and stuff. You know, all these relationships where relationships are complex, and like sometimes you think you have a problem with someone, but then when you really purify your minds, there's only love. There's no problem. You know, I'm so happy to see my friends again, even the ones who I had like somewhere deep in my mind I had been like, you know, this person wronged me or something. Now there's only compassion, and I'm just like really glad to see them again. So that's really nice. I have a lot of just like love and respect for everyone right now. I feel like a completely different person from the person who left like 2 weeks ago. In fact, I don't even remember who that person was or like what it felt like. But I just think like, man, my mind, I acknowledge that my mind had kind of gotten so dirty and so unclean. and now my mind is so clean, you know, it's just generating positivity and just trying to live the right way. I want to keep impeccable morality to kind of sustain these feelings, which for me basically means don't drink. That's a big one. But also keep practice consistent. So the past few days I have been falling asleep in my evening meditation, which is no good, but I have set a bedtime, and I want to be home by 9, meditate 9 to 10, and go to bed at 10. And I did that last night, and I still fell asleep, so maybe I'll move it earlier or something. But, you know, I can't stay out with friends all the time and neglect spiritual practice. I need to have the right balance of both. So those of you who want my time in the coming days and weeks, please just realize I'm trying to balance and honor, you know, my soul's desires. But yeah, and then I'll go on another course sometime soon. I'm very excited. But for the time being, I wish you all to be very, very well, to be very, very happy, and to be very, very peaceful. I encourage you to ask me if you have any questions or want to know anything more. And yeah, be happy. I'm going to play guitar for a few minutes and then leave you all to do your thing. But yeah, thanks for tuning in. I hope this has been helpful. Be well. See you soon. And I'll be doing more music on Saturday, of course. Cool.